Tonight, a closer look at the options Xcel had to keep power lines safe in the high winds without shutting down power for tens of thousands of Coloradans. One Coloradan whose life has been ruined by election rigging conspiracies, he gets a win as he fights back. I'm thinking Republicans at the Capitol could use a lost and found bin for all the guns they keep losing track of there. You've heard of Shakespeare in the park. This is Shakespeare in the parking lot.
I think it's about making it that theater can exist anywhere.
Let's do things differently, because this is next. Xcel has power, and it has power. It had the power to preemptively shut off power to 55,000 Coloradans ahead of last weekend's high winds to avoid possible wildfires. A state investigation is now looking into how that was handled. Our Marshall Zellinger is looking into the alternatives that Xcel had other than a preemptive power shutoff for so many people. Marshall joins us now from somewhere deep within 9 News.
I could do a lot of damage where I'm at. Kyle, at your home, if there's an electricity problem, the first line of defense might be an outlet like this, which would trip. If there's a problem, it might shut off whatever's plugged into it, like a hairdryer. The next line of defense would be like a circuit breaker. A section of your home might shut down if there's an overload issue. These are isolated ways to deal with electricity problems without having to shut down the power to your home or a news station, or like Xcel did this weekend, neighborhoods with tens of thousands of people.
Think of electricity transmission like a highway, and the off-ramps and side streets are how the electricity is distributed to your neighborhoods. This past weekend, Xcel closed the side streets for 55,000 people in 6 counties. But why not keep the side streets open and trust the fail-safes that exist that can prevent problems, like fires? Power lines have reclosers, which can stop the flow of electricity if, say, a tree falls into the lines.
It continuously is measuring the current, call it power. As soon as there's a change in the power, that's when it reacts.
Omid Baik is an assistant professor of electrical engineering at the Colorado School of Mines. He knows electricity.
Next time when you drive on the street, you see the transmission line, you see these things that before it goes anywhere, it comes to these 3 things. These are reclosers.
Reclosers are like circuit breakers. If 2 power lines hit each other or a tree falls into them, the recloser opens, stopping the flow of electricity.
So in a windy day, if 2 lines touched, that's going to cause a spark.
The recloser will open immediately.
And every time, like if they stop touching, it'll re-engage.
Correct.
If the power line is still compromised, the recloser should not close, keeping electricity from flowing. Xcel told me today that reclosers are relied on normally, and for the last few months, Xcel first changes the settings on reclosers, making them more sensitive to problems. Consider that phase 1. Xcel told me they went to phase 2 last weekend, proactively turning off power because of the extremely high winds and dry vegetation below power lines. Here's a photo of a tree into a power line that Xcel sent to the Colorado Public Utilities Commission. It's a scenario where the recloser could still shut off power, but perhaps after the tree catches on fire.
If this tree falls and the short circuit happens and the short circuit current is high enough that generates enough heat that tree is on fire, now the power is lost, but we have a fire.
Xcel told me that the normal recloser settings are a 3-shot. So what does that mean? Let's say a tree branch hits the power lines, the recloser opens, 1 shot, and stays open for a few seconds and then closes, and if the branch is still there and there's a problem, it opens again, a 2nd shot. Then it waits maybe 30 seconds to a minute before it closes a last time, and if the problem is still there, a 3rd shot it opens and stays open, stopping electricity until the crew can go out and assess the problem. Xcel said when they make it more sensitive, they make it a 1-shot. The first sign of a problem, it opens up, no power until crews get out there, but this weekend they went beyond that and did this thing. The thing that could shut down, an entire news station, Kyle. Right here. This.
Nope. We knew this program was going to get taken off the air eventually, but not like this, Marshall. It's not going to happen like this. Not you and me. We're not going down like this. That's very interesting, though.
Normally there's a lock here.
Don't touch it. The bosses are watching. Don't touch it. That is interesting to see how that works and the options that they had. Marshall, thank you. So one of the most bizarre election rigging claims in 2020 came out of Colorado and it targeted a Coloradan. It said that one guy was behind rigging the election against Donald Trump, one employee of Denver-based Dominion Voting Systems. That man's life has been threatened, turned upside down, and today, a court gave the green light to his defamation suit against the conservatives who accused him, without any evidence, of rigging the election. Eric Kumer is that Dominion Voting Systems employee. The court ruled that he has a, quote, reasonable likelihood of success in his far-reaching defamation suit. He is suing the Trump campaign and various right-wing commentators who spread unsupported claims that Kumer used Dominion Voting Systems machines to rig the election. The claim originally came from a guy named Joe Altman. He is a conservative political activist, now podcaster, who's from Douglas County. He claimed that he heard an Antifa conference call outlining the election plot.
Is this a massive case of fraud, Joe?
I think this is a conspiracy to commit fraud against the American people.
Okay.
This is a massive putting your finger on the scales of the election.
Talk Radio was happy to promote his claim, but Altman never provided any evidence that the phone call actually happened. That did not stop Altman from suggesting that Eric Kumer committed sedition, punishable by death. Altman, who is still quite popular and quite powerful in Colorado Republican politics, has called for mass hangings of politicians and journalists that he accuses of treason, including a call for the hanging of President Joe Biden recently. Now, the president, he has Secret Service protection. Many others targeted by Altman, including Dominion Voting Systems' Eric Kumer, do not have that kind of security.
The threats, the harassment that have been directed at Dr. Kumer, those are still ongoing to this day. I mean, just within the last couple weeks, people have been posting his home address and phone number on social media. And when you have somebody out here calling for executions for treason, of course it's going to give rise to this sort of violent rhetoric, this sort of violent threats. And that's really the problem that we're still dealing with to this day.
This lawsuit has been on hold for nearly 3 years, while the Trump campaign and other defendants tried to have it dismissed. Now, with the court ruling, it will go to trial, unless they settle. Kumer and Dominion have filed several other defamation suits for those election rigging lies. Fox News Channel settled with Dominion last year for more than $780 million. Colorado Democrats want to ban legislators from carrying weapons at the state capitol. And their Republican colleagues' irresponsible actions with their own firearms there keeps making the case for Democrats. Another Republican lost track of his loaded gun at the Capitol this week. The Colorado State Patrol says State Rep Don Wilson from Monument left a loaded Glock in a restroom at the Capitol Tuesday night. It was after the building was closed to the public. A janitor found it 20 minutes later and turned it in to state troopers. Wilson later contacted the State Patrol to report that he had left some stuff in the bathroom. CSP says they returned the firearm to him and he will not face any charges. Wilson apologized, issuing a statement today calling it a quote-unquote humbling experience. Democratic House Speaker Julie McCluskey said the latest gun incident at the Capitol created a dangerous situation, and she reiterated her support for their proposal to ban legislators from carrying on Capitol grounds. That's already passed the Senate, still faces a vote in the House. Republicans at the Colorado State Capitol have trouble with gun control. Beyond, philosophical objections, they cannot actually seem to keep control of their guns at the Capitol. GOP Rep Don Wilson, who left his loaded Glock in a bathroom this week. GOP Rep Ron Weinberg, who couldn't recall if he locked his truck at the Capitol last year when his 2 guns were taken. There was Republican Rep Richard Holtorf, who literally couldn't keep it in his pants. Holtorf's handgun fell out of his trousers as he ran to make a vote 2 years ago. And Republican Rep Jared Wright made national headlines in 2014 when he walked out of a debate on concealed handgun permits, leaving his loaded weapon in a bag under a table. At some point, the Colorado Capitol is going to need a lost and found bin just for Republicans' misplaced guns. Democrats want to ban all legislators from carrying at the Capitol. Opponents in the Party of Law and Order have said even if that's the law, they won't follow the order, because state legislators cannot be arrested for misdemeanors during the legislative session. Talk to firefighters in rural Colorado, and you're likely to hear how growth is stretching their budgets and resources. You might hear a common question: who should pay to protect that growth from the risk of fire? Our Evan Krugel looks at a new idea.
More than 3 years after the East troublesome fire, Grant County is still recovering. And as growth here continues, concerns are growing about future fires.
It costs money to build an additional station. It costs money to put a couple of trucks in a station. And it costs money to hire folks to man that equipment and serve the community.
Money Chief Brad White says they simply don't have, with most of their money coming from existing property tax.
You know, that money has to come from somewhere. And so are we going to rely on our taxpayers that have been paying taxes for 40 years to foot that? Or does new growth help pay for new growth?
It's a question now making its way to legislators at the state capitol, where discussion is underway on a bill that would allow fire protection districts to collect fees on new development for homes, businesses, and even oil and gas. It would also allow those districts to ask voters for sales tax increases, something they say they can't do right now.
We're asking to have a few other options to bring income and revenue into our fire districts.
Christy Olney and the Colorado State Fire Chiefs say it's the fair way to get the funding they need. Others, including the Colorado Association of Home Builders, disagree.
Imposing more fees on home buyers could potentially make new housing units even more expensive for future residents, further exacerbating our affordability challenges.
We absolutely understand the need to better fund fire districts. The question if this is the right way to accomplish this.
Now, the bill passed through the Senate's Local Government and Housing Committee 6-1 today. It now moves on to the full Senate. Kyle?
So some momentum, Evan, but we've seen things get derailed before. What options do fire departments have for revenue if this doesn't pass?
Yeah, it's a great question. They say the most likely is simply maintaining the status quo, but they say at some point voters are potentially going to get tired of them going back to that mill levy and property tax well too many times. They don't want to have to rely on that year after year.
Evan Krugel, thank you. A plan to change how Colorado funds its schools. It is a significant change from the way we do business. It comes with a huge price tag.
We never say no because we want kids to have the opportunity to access theater.
It is Shakespeare on wheels. Next. Colorado's education funding is kind of got a 1989 vibe to it. State legislators and education advocates say that if you look at inflation, the budget for our state's schools lags decades behind levels in the rest of the country. State legislators have a proposal to change that, but it would cost millions. A soon-to-be-introduced bill would change Colorado's school finance formula for the first time in 30 years. Here's the current system. It gives weight to district-wide factors like school size, the cost of living. Critics say that favors wealthy communities, and it means that Colorado's funding per student is way below the national average. The new formula, recommended by a bipartisan school funding task force, would weight school-by-school factors like the number of students in poverty or English language learners. But it would take nearly $500 million in new state funding per year. A group of 11 superintendents sent a letter to House Speaker Julie McCluskey last month questioning whether the state's education fund and property tax revenues can hold up that kind of spending, especially because Democrats are talking about property tax relief this year. The speaker insists the money is there, and she wants to phase in the additional funding over several years. Headed into a warm end to the week. Kathy Sabin's here with that.
Kyle, it's a beautiful spring day today with sunshine and 60s, but I'm calling for 70s and 80s by the time we make it to Saturday and Sunday. And along with the warmth will be an increase in the wind, and we'll be talking about fire danger yet again. But tonight, the sun is setting across the Continental Divide with a beautiful day, and we have just a warm stretch of days coming up. Again, red flag warnings and fire weather watch areas will be something we'll be talking about tomorrow and Saturday. 60, the high in Denver, 64 downtown, almost 70 in southeastern Colorado. Winds at the surface are light now out of the east and northeast, but aloft out of the northwest, we're seeing some higher gusts to 25 and 30 miles per hour over the higher passes and for those traveling I-76 through Sterling, Holyoke, and Ogallala. The winds will only increase tomorrow, this time out of the southwest, so red flag warnings, fire weather watch areas are in effect for low humidity and gusty winds, and this fire weather alert may be shifted further north toward the metro area. We have a beautiful period of weather with the storms down to our east, one offshore to the west. And so we can enjoy a quiet, mild evening tonight. A beautiful Friday coming up with sunshine in upper 70s. The same on Saturday, 80 on Sunday, but a cooler weather pattern next week with a chance for showers Tuesday, again on Thursday, and maybe a rain-snow mix by the end of next week.
Our stage is the parking lot, and we have a truck that is our stage.
Shakespeare Mobile, to make Shakespeare accessible to new audiences. Next. The idea of a little romance happening in the bed of a truck is not unusual. Just listen to country music. But Romeo and Juliet in a truck bed? That is a new stage for a familiar love story. It's the DCPA's Shakespeare in the Parking Lot series, pulling up today to Cherry Creek High School.
Are you ready for our show this morning?
People have heard of Shakespeare in the Park, but we decided to change that up and do Shakespeare in the Parking Lot.
You'll be met.
Why parking lot? Everyone has a parking lot. Schools don't need anything except where they park their cars for us to be able to produce theater.
Sometimes it's a smooth, luxurious new parking lot.
Some parking lots, the gravel is a little intense.
Sometimes it's asphalt and uneven.
And sometimes it's a little gritty and plays havoc on your knees when you're kneeling in a scene or two.
See how she leans her cheek upon her hand? That I were a glove upon that hand.
The main purpose of Shakespeare in the Parking Lot is educational. It's to make Shakespeare more accessible to students and people who don't otherwise have access, or that they feel it is bigger than life because Shakespeare is such a old art form.
Tell me, what says my love?
These plays were written over 400 years ago.
Shakespeare created theater at a time where they didn't have all the bells and whistles.
Madam!
And so we really strip it down and we bring it right to the schools so that any school has access to Shakespeare.
Take your last embrace.
I hope that they're like, oh my gosh, this is exciting. I've never seen anything like this, and they feel a part of it with us.
They're experiencing theater live right in front of them and processing in that moment where it's not about screens. They can't disconnect. They are forced to engage with us. And I think that is a really powerful tool that we have as theater artists.
Today's performance was the 710th Shakespeare in the Parking Lot performance since that program started in 2015. This weekend, they'll roll up to Old Town Square in Arvada for a performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Your feedback has me thinking, to be in anger is impiety, but who is man who's not angry? You're usually angry in feedback, that's why I say that. We'll do it next. Feedback tonight from Erin, who writes, thank you to Marshall Zellinger for the electricity safety explanation. She says, growing up in rural Ohio, we knew that if the light flickered twice, watch out for number 3, right? That third break that Marshall was talking about, because that is when the power could stay off. I'm guessing that was the same scenario. Chuck writes in to say, it does not seem real hearing news of calls for someone to be hung because they ran a voting machine that somebody didn't like. I wonder, Chuck, if that sense of unreality, that this can't be happening, is the reason why so many media outlets in Colorado choose not to cover the extremism in our midst as if it'll go away. It won't, but neither will we.